Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Reesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with David Roche, professional executive coach and mentor. Please enjoy David Roche. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today I'm here with David Roche, professional executive coach and mentor. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Mari.
I am super excited to chat creativity with you today. But before we dive into creativity world, why don't you take a couple of minutes and let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Okay. I basically a professional coach and mentor, and I specialize in working with first-time CEOs. And my background, having done psychology at university, which to me was a little bit surprising, too much rats and stats, and less about why people do what they want to do. And I did a professional hypnotherapy qualification after that, to sort of try and get over that, and then just ended up in an office job with an American textile manufacturer in their planning department, and then moved to retail and stayed in retail for the next 20 or so years. I was buying and marketing director at HMV, who are a big entertainment store with stores all over the world, and then I moved to their sister company, Waterstones, which is the biggest chain of bookstores in the UK. And then I had my first time CEO role with Borders, the American US books chain, and ran their European operation and managed the sale. And then that was a really interesting moment, because that was, do I stay a retailer? I made it to CEO. Mm-hmm. You know, I could carry on doing that, or do I stay in the world of publishing, which is very seductive and I found very attractive and interesting, and I made the latter choice. I could have gone on and end up being the CEO of a chain of supermarkets, which people would in the retail trade would have seen as a real success, and to me it would have been something that wouldn't have interested me that much. So I became a poacher turned gamekeeper, and having been a retailer, worked for HarperCollins as group sales and marketing director, and then about 12 years ago set up on my own, did a lot of consultancy originally, and then that morphed into non-exec directorship roles and chair roles. And I still chair the London Book Fair. I chair a startup in publishing, and I work with the board in Penn International on freedom of expression and those sort of things. So I still have an active sort of a plural life, if you like, within the trade. And but I a few years ago, the reason I ended up being a coach and mentor was that transition, and transition is all important in my world, from being an exec hands-on director or CEO, general manager, whatever you want to call it, to becoming a non-exec. Was actually quite difficult. You go on a training course to be a non-exec director, and all the training tells you is be scared, and they try and get you to be absolutely scared, so that you understand that you don't just turn up for the board meetings. You're actually as culpable legally as the exec directors are if anything goes wrong, and you could be struck off as a director and so on and so forth. So it didn't. That wasn't a transition. That was just a scare trap to take it seriously. But the principles of coaching, the challenge, the support, the good questions, all those things are perfect for coaches to use and perfect for chairs and non-execs to use. And I think, today we'll be talking about creativity, and it's all very well being creative as an exec director and with your teams.
Yeah.
As a non-exec director and as a chair, where you input into strategy, but where do you start and stop? Do you really get involved with the exec team on devising the creative side of it? Less and less so. And is that right or is that wrong? So it's interesting. You start off in your career as a specialist of some sort. You tend to, and creatives specialist in their position probably. But then as you move up your career, people who feared being a general manager, and I think I was one of those. I'm a generalist. Oh my God, I'm jack of all trades, master of none. Sure. But then you realize after a while, actually, that being a generalist, you realize is a specialist skill in itself. And the higher you get, the more important that is. And I use in my I had a book out in March. I use in that the example of using another creative metaphor, that you become the conductor. You're no longer the star, the quarterback, the whatever hell it might be. You're the conductor, and everyone on the stage is looking at you for passion, tempo, the script, timing, urgency, all those things. But you have to understand that, hang on, everyone's got a different personality. The brass is all like that. The strings they all think they're the most important, but actually they're all different personality, and you need to make the whole better than the sum of its parts. And interestingly, from the audience perspective, from outside, the only person who doesn't contribute orally to the performance that they're listening to is the conductor.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I love that you bring up the phrase passion, because you strike me as someone who is incredibly passionate about what you do and how you do it. I'm so curious, what does it mean to you to be creative?
Well, I find creative is a difficult word to define and to sort of relay, and people who describe themselves as creative, or the worst thing is when you're in a board meeting or you're with a senior leadership team, or you're right, we got an away day, and I've penciled in the last hour before lunch we're going to get creative, and it's it's just one, it doesn't mean anything in that context, and actually being creative as a group tends not to work very well in my experience. Because you've got the board being creative, and you sit with the finance director sitting there going, well, I know I'm not a creative person, and you've got the IT director going, and everyone, and if they do contribute, everyone goes, well, what do you know? You're the IT. It really brings out the worst in everybody. And actually, as you go on up in the organization, in any responsibility that you delegate, you learn that trust is all important, and hiring the best people is all important, and actually giving someone understanding that goal of what you're trying to achieve is great. And once the person's got that, almost to a certain extent, it's like exaggeration and cost and everything comes into it, and resource. But how they get there is less important, unless they have personality disorders. But and I guess it's the same. It's slightly the same in the creative world, and you see it again in coaching. Defining that goal, what are you actually trying to achieve as the end result? Is probably the most important always, because if you don't do that, being creative there's no point in it. Just being creative for creative's sake, and then at that point, it's who you talk to, the research you do, the lateral conversations you have with people in other industries who are probably trying to achieve the same things, but their tram lines that they run on have come from a different place and go in a different direction to the tram lines that you're stuck in. And coaches, when people are stuck, they're always trying to help the person being coached to find new ways of doing things, new ideas of practices that they might be able to
Yeah.
to work with, and so I think establishing the goal is critical, because then you can be let loose a little bit
Right.
on different ways to get there.
Yeah, which in my world speaks hugely to creativity and that experience and working within relationship and trusting the people you have in your pod or on your team, and how everyone brings their own unique creative experience. Whether it's the IT director, their creativity will look very different, but I don't know that it's any less creative.
No, yes, don't get me wrong. I wasn't saying that they weren't creative, but I think there's a sort of narrow definition that's generally accepted, by people
Sure.
within and outside business. That
Yeah,
creativity is Picasso, creativity is Mozart.
right.
There is creativity, as you say, in every single facet
Yeah.
um, of life.
Yeah, and it's the bridging into a more business realm that can be quite challenging.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and the relationships are critical, because as a CEO, I was never particularly the creative one, but I understood that you had to build the trust to allow other people to do it. So it's that the culture allows failure. It doesn't, one strike and you're out. It does
Yeah.
not necessarily breed a creative culture.
You are absolutely correct. It does not. Yeah, and it keeps people from wanting to share ideas if someone else discounts them or thinks it's not a good idea. And yeah, it's
Yeah,
that like psychological safety in being able to share whatever idea
absolutely.
is. Mhm.
Yeah, and in retail terms, you might have thousands of employees, but they're dispersed over hundreds and hundreds of different geographic locations as
Mhm.
little pods, little teams. But and certainly a lot about what you're doing isn't necessarily the systems or whatever.
Right.
It's actually, and particularly in book retailing, which I was working in, a lot is about you. It's not like a chemist, where you have a chain of chemists where I go in the door on the right up here, I will always find
Hmm.
diapers and whatever it might be, and over here I will find toothpaste, and and I'm comfortable because I know exactly where I am. This with a bookshop, you might be in a mall here, or you might be in a very sophisticated university campus there, or you might be in
Yeah.
a whatever. And so how the books you're stocking and how you merchandise them are very different. So you need to have people who want to and are capable of actually tapping into their communities to be able to make those local decisions themselves. And so that trust again needs to be delegated down. But
Hmm.
but you're going to have such different mindsets of managers across hundreds and hundreds of stores, and I guess being seen as a chain of independent stores in one way is now. I mean, James Daunt's done this with Barnes and Noble very successfully. Is
Hmm.
is now the way to go. It's not about consistency and uniformity. It's
Right.
actually the freedom to do your own thing.
That more unique expression in
Mm.
what works for that market
Yeah,
will be very different than works in another one. You
sure.
strike me as someone who has a lot of things that inspire you, but who or what inspires you in your life these days?
These days, oh gosh, actually, these days, I suppose going back a bit, it was always people who thought differently,
Hmm.
or and a massive sports fan. So, they weren't necessarily the best examples. John McEnroe was, it was always a hero of mine. Seve Ballesteros and golf. These are people who had, almost it was their creativity was also their flaw. They got themselves into all sorts of trouble, but
Sure.
actually their talent and their genius got them out of it. And actually, you sort of love them even more because they got themselves into such terrible problems. So that always intrigued me, I found that very inspirational. And I think, the working with people who got a completely different skill set, luckily I learned that early, because I see so many people who hire in their own likeness, and there is an echo chamber. There's no challenge, and actually that's a terrible. So they might all think they're all creative, but it's a terrible environment for creativity, because you need that challenge. You need someone with a completely different view, and actually, whether it's someone from a different background, different neurodivergent sort of approach, that sort of you go, wow, that would never have occurred to me, ever. I don't know. So that I used to find very inspirational. And I was always a team player in sport and in business. And when you get that sudden click within a team of trust, and actually, that people want to hear, and they bring each other in because they know what everyone's skill sets are. That can be quite magical. And nowadays, I guess, what do I find inspirational? Now I'm at the third act, possibly, I don't know. Seeing people I work with, or I coach, or whatever, that are coming up and actually starting to realize their full potential. It is really something, because I've worked with a lot of people over the years who I've seen not necessarily deliver to their full potential, and that was part of the reason I wrote the book, because I think it is the relationships. There's that element I talk about, where if people are going for a job, and particularly the CEO role, on the short list, probably everybody can do that role to a certain extent, but people aren't looking for who can do the job. They're looking to who can I trust to do the job.
Right.
And I think that makes an enormous difference, and actually makes the internal candidate probably the one who should be favourite, if anyone's done any succession planning, and if they've done the homework to make their own luck. So that's really what I'm trying to do with people, is to build the relationships they need inside the company, both up and down and across, and outside the company as well, within their industries, within their media, and so on and so forth. And I think, because when you get that first time you're made a CEO is a very weird change that no one can really prepare you for, and that the companies transition plan incredibly badly.
Yeah. So for people who are interested in getting to that level of CEO, but they may have several steps to move to get there, how would you encourage someone to take the early steps towards that?
Yeah, the very good question. I think that trust thing, building trust with your boss. I mean, you often can't get much further than your boss. Sometimes you can, but you don't. That boss may not want to be seen to be you leapfrogging them and trying to go straight there. You might get opportunities to present at a board meeting or whatever, and it's putting yourself into the boss's mindset. And you see it all the time. You go, right, here's the agenda for the board meeting, and here's a 25 minutes, half an hour slot for someone to come in and present this project, which is really important to the company. So that person comes in, and they've spent days doing slides and updates and everything else. And what always happens in a poorly run board is it's shoved down at the bottom end of the agenda, and they spend so much time not talking strategically, but talking operationally, and trying to score points off each other. And then you might have a boss who's sitting there machine gunning around the room, giving everyone a bollocking about things they did badly, rather than discussing what's going to happen in the future. So anyway, it comes to the end of the meeting, and they wheel in this poor person, and the person's boss goes, "Hey, look, can you do it in 10 minutes? Can you do it like?" And all the work they've done, all that preparation's gone. So, a good coach and mentor, you're never too early for that, and you're never too late, which is another point. Everyone needs a coach and mentor, no matter how experienced, can actually get a lot of prep out of that to go have a version that's like 10 minutes. Also, when you're talking to your boss, talk to them about what problems they have. What's their biggest concern in the remit that they have? And it may be, it's this area here. I haven't got anyone to run it, or I've got someone who doesn't know. And you're sitting there going, I don't know anything about that, but I'm going to make it my business to find that out and solve that problem for you. It's outside of my remit, but would that help? Oh my God. And then if you do succeed in doing that, they're going, my God, the person's got a brilliant attitude. They've also shown they can take on something they don't know anything about without an experience. And they're great at it. So when it comes to that trust, can they do a CEO job? Something they've never done before, something that so and so, absolutely. This person's great. So having that attitude, and then finally the other bit is having a successor for yourself. If you run a big department, that's really important, and it's you versus an outside candidate at the end, and maybe it's 50-50. Maybe they'll say, hang on, we can't promote this girl, this man, this whatever, because they're important. It's so important in their department, and actually moving them risks that sort of decaying or whatever might happen. So let's give it to the outside person, because at least that leaves you firmly in position that we don't lose anything there. And you go, wow, if you never find out, but actually having that chain of succession behind you, it isn't a threat to you and your position. I don't want to hire anyone better than me. Nonsense. I always hire people better than you. But make sure that you've freed yourself to be able to be moved on. Say people who say, I can't go on holiday, I can never go on holiday, I can never go on holiday. I have a picture in the book of a woman sunbathing on with sunglasses on, drink in hand on a beach, and the bubble going out, going, God, I'm good. If you can go on holiday for 2 weeks and the business purrs along brilliantly without you, you are doing a fantastic job.
I love all of those pieces, and just the reminders that I think individuals forget about. How can they, even if they're not in a managerial role or executive role, you can still make change. You can still be resourceful. You can still take those steps to prepare yourself to keep growing and changing.
Yeah, I do also do some pro bono work at a junior level for people who coming into publishing. You don't necessarily have a background that means they even knew what publishing was beyond editorial, perhaps. And they sit they go, I've got an admin job, and I go in and it's ridiculous because no one's told me all this that how to do that, and this bit's really inefficient. So I'm sitting there going, great. So by the time you finish that admin job in 3 months' time, because you're going to be moved around the department, why don't you write the rules of the game for the next person, so that they come in and there's a real clear plan for what they need to do, and solve that one problem. And then at least you've moved on, and everyone was going, my God, no, it's always been like that. We hate changing that because nobody knows how to do it, and then it's rubbish for another 3 months, and that sort of attitude of going, I'm going to leave things in a better situation than I found them, and the bits that frustrated me, I will solve for the next person.
That makes sense. Level. Yeah. And in terms of like stepping into coaching, I want to circle back to, you were talking about surrounding people who think the same as you're just getting more of the same. And so as a coach, how do you surround yourself with people who are challenging you to keep growing in your own field?
I have a coach as well. And I didn't for a while when I first did coaching, and I sort of go, how do I do this? How does it? I suddenly went, listen to yourself. The big thing about coaching is it solves that problem. Everyone can see the answer much more easily to someone else's problem than they can to their own.
Absolutely.
And there's a magic moment that I discovered. It's a bit like hypnotherapy. The first time you hypnotize someone, you're sort of going, oh my God, what's happening here? This is really, didn't know I could do it. And it was a bit the same first time you're coaching someone. But I think the coaching and mentoring combination is really powerful.
Mhm.
And I see it when with coaching you're supposed to only ask questions. So you might go, right, okay, so what else might you be able to do? And that's where the creative stuff comes. And people, when they run out of ideas, that's at the point they suddenly start getting creative.
Mhm.
That sounds strange, but it absolutely happens. But then you're talking with CEOs, and they're very busy people, and they're sitting there going, "I've
Mhm.
got 5 minutes to go. What would you do?" No, don't keep asked. Don't say anything else. Anything else? I've got 5 minutes. I'm gonna sack you. Um, and what I found is if the CEOs get stuck trying to think of the answer to the problems that they can't see because it's their own problem. The most amazing thing happens. I just go, right, let me tell you a story about something similar-ish that happened to me. Blah, 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 blah. And I don't even get halfway through the story. It doesn't really matter what the story is. But suddenly they go, hang on, something you just said triggered something
Mhm.
in me, and I can see the answer now in a way that I've never been able to see it before. And it happens all the time. And you just go, what? And I guess it's the change of framework
Yeah.
that you're talking about their problems, that you're surrounded by their problems, being their own problems, they can't see it. And then suddenly you're talking about another problem that you've got, and they get into problem solving mode, and they go, right, okay,
Mhm.
and then that problem solving mode, while they're in the cloud of their own problems being discussed, they suddenly make that connection. They can do it. As I say, it happens all the time. Too many times for it to be a coincidence. But every time it happens, you sit there, go, wow.
It's
um,
magic. Yeah.
but it sort of makes sense. So I do a lot of scuba diving, and I did a free diving course
Mm.
a few years ago, and I'm in a pool at the beginning, and they're saying, right, how long can you hold your breath? And you go down, and it's like, I don't know, 30 or 40 seconds or something, and then they go, right, okay, how deep can you dive? And you go down 3 or 4 meters, and they're going, right, well, you really need to be able to hold your breath for 3 minutes, and then we need to take you down to 10, 15 meters. And you're sort of going, I don't think I can do that. I really, it's just not going to happen. So you want a mentor who's been there, done that, and is not going to let you kill yourself during the
Mhm.
training, knows what they're doing. But you really need the coach to knock down this barrier, this limiting belief that says, I don't think I can do this.
Yeah.
And within 2 hours, I was holding my breath for 3.5 minutes. And the next morning, I was diving down to over 20 meters. And you're sitting there going, and they go, happens with everyone, absolutely everyone.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there going, that power of the two, it
Right.
was telling you that physiologically that there's a reflex that means you won't take in the water, and that actually when your body's telling you it needs oxygen, what it's telling you is this,
Mhm.
and you're interpreting it differently. So keep going, and that stuff was invaluable.
Mm.
But it was you can do it. Everyone does it.
Mhm.
Um,
I love that
that
reminder.
so that I took into what I do, because I think that combination is really important.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like your ability to have been there and to support other people through those transitions and relationally
Yeah,
is one of your superpowers.
yeah, yeah. The relation thing, and I guess the one good thing in a way is there is no right or wrong. Well, there
Mhm.
is there are obvious wrongs, but there's no necessarily right, because if I'm talking to you today and we're talking about this, if I was talking to you in a week's time, you may have been through something else, I may have been through
Yeah.
something else. Or it's a bad day.
Yeah.
It's just don't have don't just you haven't got it that day, that you're
Mhm.
stumbling all over it. And I think people don't sit there and put themselves in the other person's chair the whole, as much as they really should. It is the superpower, emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
and that empathy to be able to go, hang on, this person I know he's a great person, they're just not delivering that moment. crack the whip harder, and that back in the day in retail, that was exactly what happens. Fear of my managing director used to say, fear of the sack. That's what keeps everyone going. And you just go, oh. But you're sitting there going, this is the guy who's actually saying, do you know, my father, I just was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and I've now just become the primary carer, and for the last week I've been there. And it's a different conversation. It's a very different conversation. How can we support you? How can we get the best out of you? How can we, whatever.
Yeah.
But are you the sort of person that people feel they could even say that to?
Right. Yeah. I think that's such an important aspect, and the relationship that those pieces and empathy and emotional intelligence, and how even starting at the bottom, you have things that you can do to make changes for yourself and others within a company. I think those reminders are amazing. And I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. We could talk so much longer, but I just have one last question. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
As I say, my initial reaction is the conductor reaction of getting the best out of everybody else. I say I like being in a team, being creative on my own. Having written a couple of books, that was intensely satisfying. The process I really enjoyed, as well as the result. But the team dynamics, and I just think that's magic, where suddenly you see things clicking and you're going, hang on, this has now got its own momentum. It's really cracking. So I don't necessarily internalize it. I think always testing yourself to do new things. I didn't always scuba dive or whatever, and doing free diving in my late 50s was insane. The only encouragement you can give is try new things, and which includes trying to network, forcing yourself to meet new people. If that, some people find that very difficult, but actually getting a new perspective on life is creativity, and it does keep you sane and young.
I absolutely agree. And it has been such a treat to chat with you. If people want to learn more about the work you do, your book that's out or coming out, how could they go about doing that?
Book it. I don't know if it's gone backwards on the screen, but Become a Successful First-Time CEO is the name of the book. You can get it on Amazon, Amazon.com, as well as Amazon.co.uk, etc. And as I say, it's a book about relationships. My editor described it as a why-to book, not a how-to book, because there isn't anything about bullet points in these circumstances. Do that. And it's full of anecdotes and stories, which is the way I learn best. And one person said the best quote said, not many business books can pull off being a genuine page turner, and I took that as a big compliment. So that book's got contact details. My coaching website is grayareacoaching, all one word.com, with Gray spelt in the UK English way, a GREY rather than GRAY. And the website has all sorts of details about myself, my coaching, my methodology, my passion, and so on and so forth. And there's a media news tab, which has got lots of podcasts, lots of articles that I've written, interviews and stuff in there as well.
Wonderful. I'll put all of that in show notes so people have easy access. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. It has been a pure pleasure.
No, it's been a pleasure for me too.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.